Hey, welcome back to the Church Answers podcast. I'm saying welcome back because I'm hoping you've heard some of these. I mean, we'll soon be around number 40, which seems almost impossible because we've been doing these for such a short while, but we do drop 3 short podcasts a week. So you can listen to previous podcasts. You can listen to the 3 short podcasts we dropped today. You can pick one of the 3 or 2 of the 3 that you like, whatever you want to do. I'm always grateful to Belay. Belay is our founding sponsor, and they continue to be. And you've probably heard me talk about Belay ad infinitum. But basically, they take the responsibility of some of the work that you don't want to do off you by providing virtual workers. We've been using these virtual workers for many, many years, and we don't even think of them in any way except a part of our team. They become part of our team, part of our family, and that's the kind of people that Belay gives us. So you might need an administrative assistant, and you get a virtual assistant. You may need a bookkeeper. You may need someone who can do some of the tasks that just normally you don't think about, but you say, I bet I can ask Belay, and they'll match you up. They've always done a great job of matching. And when it's all said and done, you've got someone to help you in many, many ways. Hey, check before you start hiring someone, check Belay. I mean, their assistants are so efficient that you can assign them 10 to 20 hours, 15 hours, and be like you have a 40-hour person because they are so effective. Also, download their new download, relatively new, 25 tasks a pastor can delegate to an assistant. It's a free download. It's pretty good stuff there for you to do a quick read. Get it at belaysolutions.com/Thom Rainer, or look in the show notes and download it there as well. Okay, I'm going to talk about a subject that can be a sore subject to some church leaders, pastors in particular, but not all of them. And there's certain caveats that I have to make before we answer this question: how frequent should business meetings be? Now, the first caveat is this: your church may not have classic business meetings. It may be of such a polity that those decisions are made by some leadership group or elders, and so the day-by-day decisions don't require a business meeting. It could be that you have some type of meeting, but you're not voting as a congregation because you're not a congregational government, and you have meetings that are more informational. There are lots of possibilities. I am specifically referring to those meetings where you are most likely a congregational form of government. I realize that's not all of you listeners in churches. I get that. And it probably comes down to a vote for some of the things in the business meeting. Now, it certainly could be an informational meeting, and we could apply it here, but I'm specifically talking about those churches that vote on different aspects of church life. Okay? So that's the premise of this. And so when you begin to ask the question, how many business meetings should we have a year? There's a presupposition that you're probably dealing with congregational form of government. There's a presupposition that you are probably dealing with some type of vote that takes place on somewhat of a regular basis. Now, the first thing that we have to ask is, what does your bylaws say? Many times your bylaws determine the number of meetings, but many times it's not specified. Some bylaws can say at least annually, but churches still have it monthly. Some bylaws don't even have specificity about the frequency of the meetings, but they have specific guidelines on where there needs to be a vote. So one of the first things that I would say to you is look in your bylaws. If you don't like what the bylaws say, you can always present bylaw changes to the church. Okay, we've got all of those data points. So now here's the question: how frequent should church business meetings be? So, first question is, what do you have to vote on in your church? Let me say that again. What do you have to vote on in your church? Your bylaws may not stipulate it. There may be some type of other document in your church that stipulates it, but that is one of the big issues. For example, if your bylaws say any expenditure in the church above $500, first of all, I would say that's a bad policy, because if you have such minutia voted on in your church of any size, for that matter, you're going to have a church that has a bunch of micromanagers. And second of all, it would require you to meet really every month. Certainly at least once a month. And so a lot depends upon what you are voting on. Second, it depends upon the expectations of the church members. There are church members, and you know them very well. And those church members believe that they should vote on everything in the church. They'll ask the question, well, we didn't vote on it. Many church members have this expectation that everything should come to a congregational vote. And you say, is that literal, Thom? It's almost literal. Almost everything should come to a congregational vote is the perspective of some of these church members. So that obviously means that you have to have a frequent vote. But let's get back to the question, what should your frequency be? Well, the first part of it is deal with the expectations of the church. If you're currently having monthly business meetings, that's probably too frequent, but it'll be difficult to go to annual meetings. So make a move for a season to quarterly meetings. Deal with the expectations. Second of all, clarify where you really need a congregational vote. And if you're a congregational form of government, some examples of where you really need it are maybe an annual vote for the budget, a vote to call a pastor. And many times the pastor will have the authority to bring on the rest of the staff. So it would be to call a pastor, and maybe large capital expenditures. You can fill in the blank about what that amount should be, $500,000, $1 million, or something of that sort. If you have that kind of frequency of need, what you're probably going to have is an annual business meeting unless otherwise needed. For example, you will always be voting on an annual budget, as an example. But hopefully, you're not going to always be voting on a pastor. If you're voting on a pastor once or twice a year, there's a problem in itself. So you should be voting just on once a year for the budget. However, another exception could be we're going to have a large expenditure. We're going to do a $1 million renovation in our church. We're going to take care of some deferred maintenance. Well, it's very possible, and in fact, it would probably be even wise in most size churches, not all, to bring that to a vote, at least to some type of information or discussion. But here's the bottom line. The business of the church should primarily be ministry. The business of the church should not primarily be business in the classic sense of the word. And so if that is the case, you would want to move toward less frequent business meetings. My bias is clear. My bias is an annual meeting is sufficient. And if you need a time between them for a capital expenditure or probably voting on a pastor or something of a high level decision, then do so. But otherwise, once a year should be adequate for your meetings. Now, if it is not culturally acceptable to do so, if it's going up against some type of principle that is at least inherent within the personalities of your church members, move it to once a quarter. But I will say this, if you're having true monthly business meetings, in most cases, you are inviting your church to have conflict because there will be votes and there will be some on one side and one on the other. My recommendation is try to go to once a year if you have business meetings, no more than once a quarter, and try to narrow down the things that truly need a vote. A lot of bias in that, I understand, but I've worked with a lot of churches and I've seen what frequent business meetings can do to the life of the church. It can cause the ministry focus to be greatly distracted. Well, thank you again, Belay, for being a part of this podcast, for sponsoring it, for letting us come here and share this type of quick information with the listeners and to the viewers. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a review, subscribe to us, whatever your podcast is, give us a rating and review there as well. Get the word out about the Church Answers podcast. We are growing rapidly. We don't take that for granted. We are really, really excited about what God is doing through this podcast. Thank you, Belay, as always, for being our sponsor. Just remember, they are our exclusive sponsor. They always want to give you something, and they have a download right now that is simply called 25 Tasks a Pastor Can Delegate to an Assistant. Get that at belaysolutions.com/Thom Rainer or look in the show notes. And once again, thank you as always for being a part of the Church Answers podcast. I will see you in the next one. Hey, folks, this is a PS to our podcast. We got some exciting stuff that we want to offer you absolutely for free. Sam, when you think about predictive factors in a church's growth, if you take out demographics, what are some things that come to mind? Just two. I mean, don't give me a list of 10. Just two or three things that come to mind on predictive growth of a church.
Well, evangelism and whether the church is doing it or not.
Bingo.
And then I will add, is it an ongoing evangelism emphasis?
Double bingo. Well? Maybe something about leadership and their commitment to that. So all of the above.
Evangelistic churches have evangelistic pastors. Is the staff, is the lead pastor doing the work themselves?
We have a free download for you, and it's actually a sheet that you can self-score. You answer 20 questions, anywhere from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And we come back and we predict what your growth rate is going to be for the next year in worship attendance. It's not a perfect tool, but it's a good tool. There's a link to that for the attendance predictor. Look in the show notes. You'll absolutely love it. That's cool. We'll see you soon.